Peace, 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 brothers and sisters within the English Empire, or I would like to say the Empire of Albion. It is a beautiful evening. Hopefully, those of you who are having the opportunity to check out this live, you had a great day. Hopefully, everyone in the household is safe and sound. Hopefully your bellies are full, you're hydrated, you've been able to prepare and plan your going out for tomorrow. But in the meantime, now you're relaxing and settling down. And with that part of your daily routine, I'm going to hopefully be able to be part of that when it comes down to giving these live discussions and going over some topics that have been, been very interesting to me lately. One topic that have pretty much, I'm sure have been on many people's minds, throughout the years and decades and even centuries. And that topic is the origin of the human race. And of course, there's going to be many theories, which we know there's many theories out there where we come from. And I like to go ahead and give a shot at it from my perspective, just from over, a book that I've been reading, which is called, once again, Paradise Found, The Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, a study of the prehistoric world by William F. Warren. So this is, something that ended up popping up in my research. I have these moments where, a thought comes to me. I'm just sitting there and I'm relaxing, and all of a sudden something tells me, go look this up, go search this. And I'm like, you know what? Let me go ahead and do that work. Let me go take a stab at what this, with this thought or this glimpse of insight brought to me at that moment. And there's always something great. It's always something good. And for those of you who've been paying attention to, my channel, I talk on many different topics, but the main topic that I've been hitting home at is about Saturn and the misunderstanding that many of us have about Saturn archetype. And that ended up bringing me to, like I said, to come into the understanding that we don't really truly know much about our origins from the modern understanding. We need to go back and start seeing what those explorers and scientists and people who were really in the know at the time when we were pretty much, in the dark. And I mean in the dark, I mean during the time when, we didn't have the opportunity to look into these books. We were really pretty much like immature adolescents, so to speak. And now that the archives are open and many more people are, spiritually being drawn to, want to know their origins and where we come from, we have been put on this path, which I like to call the path of enlightenment, because, you can only be in the dark for so long. And like they say, ye seek, ye shall find. So seek and ye shall find. And that's one thing we're doing. We're looking. We want to know, so therefore we can share this miraculous discovery with others. All right, so I don't want to get too long-winded in the introduction because I know it's late, but I want to kind of get used to speaking, right off the top of the dome to you brothers and sisters, because everything in life is not going to go according to the script. And I want you to understand that your life is tailor-made for you. So however you decide to start, the journey, It's met and made for you. All right. Hopefully the music in the background is not too loud. You can hear my voice with no problems. It's supposed to, soothe you, especially when you get the, storytelling. So I want you guys to be able to get used to the nighttime vibe. All right. So once again, tonight is Pisces Messages. I am North Node Pisces. I have Pisces where I'm located now. I have Pisces in the 3rd house underneath my sidereal Vedic chart. Pisces is known as the spiritual one inside the zodiac. He rules the sign of the 12th house, which is ruled by Jupiter, the benefic or the guru within the zodiac. And Jupiter just went direct in Cancer in the 4th house, which Cancer rules the 4th house. So I'm doing some Jupiterian work right now, let's just say that, because where I'm at home, it's the nurturing type of vibe, something that can connect you, or we can all connect together with, no matter where you are on the planet. And the storytelling and narrative, journey is pretty much going to be through, like I said, a guided discussion of Paradise Found, the cradle of the human race at the North Pole. And what we're going to do, we're going to be separating the author's claims, the types of evidence is used, and what it means symbolically as well as spiritually. So once again, peace. Welcome to the Noble House of Belmont. And I'm going to present you not something that's settled in the fact. I'm exploring it. And like I said, I'm separating what the author was talking about in regards to what they found, what evidence exists, as well as what the symbolism actually truly means. And this is going to give us a idea how our predecessors or the ancients, how they lived or how they did things. Hopefully, I'm going to see how far I can get into the book, because I don't want to be up too late either. I have things to do in the morning. It's also my solar return, so that's going to be something interesting to see what the Most High has in store for me to enjoy on my day, on my solar return. All right, so tonight's theme is, like I said, the North as memory. We hear, or we've heard many different stories about the North Pole, location where Santa and Santa's reindeers and his elves are located. We've also heard for those who heard the mythical story about the Hyperboreans or the Hyperboreans, Atlantis. All of these stories have a geographical origin. And one thing that we are, as humans today, are trying to do is trying to uncover not only the location, but our origin within the script. And we're going to see tonight why humans keep imagining a lost home at the top of the world. So we know Pisces is about the unseen, the ocean, the dream or the longing. Since it's ruled the 12th house is about dissolution, dissolution is about dissolving. After you're done with this existence, it's now time to wrap it up. And part of our wrap up is going back home. It's time to go home. I've always kind of felt that was the theme for a very long time, even since I've returned on this planet. It's us as humans, it's time for us to return to the origins, because we have strayed so far off the path. And the only way for us to put ourselves back in alignment, we have to go back to the drawing board by going back to the books and reinvestigate, what those who will come before us, like I said, like for instance, William Warren, and see what they were able to find and what we can do and utilize in our waking reality today. So we know the third house is the house of voice and story. And so tonight we're going to be using story to see the pattern that is trying to be told to us. So what I was actually doing, where I was at before, I ended up getting this insight to take a look at the book. Like I told you, I have been interested a lot about Saturn, father figure, the archetype. We know from my research that Saturn is known as the Great Father, and the Great Father from David Talbot's research in the Saturn myth dwelled in the territory we call the Arctic North, the North Pole. And throughout civilizations or history, there have been many symbols that have been either created or recreated in various either schools of thought or religions that play out the same common theme or motif that takes us right back to the same origin. And like I said, this origin not only is spiritually or symbolic, but it's also speaking geographically. Now the planet itself is heating up. And I've always wanted to be in locations that was warm, that was hot. So what I was dealing with at the time that brought me, like I said, that insight, was just, I'm like, I gotta look into more research. I'm sitting outside underneath the sun, saying like, go and type in, when I was doing research, especially too, about the Vedic or the Aryans or that history in regards to the Phoenician, Anglo-Saxon, Britons, all having that origin connection. Some told me go look into this. That's where I got that flash of insight, like, go look this up. So I went to Google and I always type in archive.org when I, start doing my research, because I want to see if there's a book that's going to, coincidentally pop up in that search engine that will tie me to what this flash of insight is trying to show me. So next thing you know, I end up seeing the book Paradise Found. Like, it was one of the few links that popped up. And I'm like, okay, because I've always had this feeling from my research that wherever we come from, the way how the planet is designed, life had to have taken place when it was hot, warm, tropical. Like, this is technically a subtropical planet. So when life had or was created, it had to have been like this all over the world. Well, we know the North Pole today is covered in snow, and we know if that's the case, then there had to have been a time where that location was not covered in snow. All of our all of our compasses points towards the North Pole, because that's what they say, the magnetic field of the planet is the strongest, so that's why all of our compasses point there. Of course, that's what they say. But me, I like to investigate based off of the theories that have already been presented to us. One theory is that there's a black mountain called, I can't think of the Nigiri, Pradius or something like that. I end up pulling it up momentarily, but it's called the Black Mountain, or the Black the Black Magnetic Mountain, excuse me. And a book that was given to King Edward III, or it's called the Fortuna, Invenitio Fortuna, was given to King Edward III from the Royal House of Plantagenet that was speaking in regards to this location. And I want to say that they were given a charter to be able to go and explore, because it was speaking in regards to like our origins. So as us as being English heirs or English people here in the territory we call America, this is definitely something we want to explore, because the fact that King Edward, the third, our predecessor, was given this information, and a lot of exploring up in the north was taking place during the time of exploration, which we call towards the New World. They stopped talking a lot about the north, because they say it's too dangerous to be traveling up there. And of course, we know what goes on up there now. It's very dangerous, because of the weather. But like I said, historically, they spoke otherwise, and that's the reason why they wanted to charter up to these locations. But I don't want to get too far off into that without us going into the book. So I didn't ignore these insights, and like I'm speaking now, what it means to me is that I'm getting closer to uncovering what it is that I've been looking for, and that is our origins. So we have to go back. When you get too far off the track, you have to return to the beginning. So let's go ahead and get started. And once again, I'm not here to argue with anybody, but this is a pattern that continues to keep reoccurring. This is why this book pulled me. So once again, the title of this is called Paradise Found, the Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole. We're going to be discussing this tonight because we're here, and the time is March 11, 2976 of the Berber calendar, which is 2026 of the Gregorian calendar. We're on Mountain Time, so of course those who are on the Eastern Seaboard right now, it'll be March 12th. So happy solar return to me at that moment, but I want to wait until I actually get it here according to the Mountain Time. Welcome to the channel. Once again, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. If this information, if these discussions builds is something that you feel others will be interested into, I don't really get the opportunity to do this as often as I like, but if I'm starting to get the audience who I feel is ready to hear these conversations, I will continue to keep doing them. And those of you who can contribute to the fund or to the pot, so that way I can continue to keep making it. Because everything that you see over here, I designed myself, may utilize whatever little programs I need to help me do it. But from the introduction, video, all of that I did myself. So, and it's a lot of work that goes into this, so it's not easy and it's time consuming. So, and if you want to get better, we'll be able to dive into other topics. And if you yourself, if you have questions, don't forget to leave them down there inside the box. I will try to answer them the best I can when I see them. The goal is to build up a community with like-minded individuals, part of this intellectual movement, and bring us underneath the same fold, underneath the English Empire. Our predecessors, believed in many different things. They believed in dragons, they believed in elves, they believed in magic, they believed in all sorts of things. We lived in a magical reality, we lived in a magical world, and we are those same people. We still believe in that, but it requires the mind to travel down those corridors and explore and see what it's capable of finding and discovering and sharing and bring it to the light of day amongst the world. for others to be able to, experience and, see. And this is something that I know many of you, may enjoy, especially when it comes down to, like I said, the origins of the human race. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and get started into the book, Paradise Found, The Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, A Study of the Prehistoric World by William F. Warner, President of Boston University, corporate member of the American Oriental Society, author of The True Key to Ancient Cosmology and Mythical Geography, etc., etc. So we would love to know a little bit more about Mr. Warner. From what we hear so far of his credentials, President of Boston University, that's a pretty good title and rank to be holding, and for us to be able to be exploring one of his books, to be holding such a prestigious rank is going to be very, very monumental in my opinion. So this was written back or published in 1885. That's the reason why I always say go to the old books, brothers and sisters. The old books is going to hold a lot of keys and clues to our glorious past. So here's a map. I already said, diagram illustrating the true key to ancient cosmology and mythical geography. A is the north celestial pole in the zenith. The axis of the heavens is AB, perpendicular position. CD, the axis of the earth, perpendicular position. What is 1111? Or the the quadruple lines. The abode of the spring god or gods, 2, 3, 4, Europe, Asia, and the known portion of Africa. C, location submerged Eden, the strength of hill of Sion. Alright, so kind of get a little idea. So it's showing this is where heaven, God abode above here, which takes us all the way up, like he said, shows to the North Pole. Alright, so we have that. See, let's go and go to Wikipedia real quick, excuse me, so we can go ahead and read a little bit about, like I said, Mr. Warner. All right, what do you know? He was born on March 13th. You see, so I didn't even pay attention to his date of birth until really now. So this is what I'm speaking in regards to, like how synchronistic events take place, or how the Creator, try to tie you into people, places, and things that's going to be in alignment of your path and what you're called to do. All right, so William, as we see, was born March 13th, 1833, passed December 7th, 1929, and he was the first president of Boston University. All right, so the first president of Boston University, that's a pretty big position, brothers and sisters. Boston University is a private research university in Boston, Massachusetts. BU was founded in 1839 by a group of Boston Methodists with its original campus in Newbury, Vermont. It was chartered in Boston in 1869. All right, and we all know that the Methodist Church got its origins coming from out of the Church of England, and it's one of the many denominations that broke off from the Church of England after the disestablishmentarianism, which was pretty much this establishment or removal of the state church. And the state church at the time here in the colonies, or in this territory that we call at the time in America, was underneath the jurisdiction of the crown. So once all of that took place, breaking away, as you can see, they created their own, philosophical societies, and as well, like I said, their own theological denominations. All right, so it said he was born in Williamsburg, Massachusetts. He graduated from Wesleyan University, Middletown, Connecticut, 1853. and there became a member of the Mystical Seven. All right, he later studied at Andover Theological Seminary and at Berlin and at Halle. He entered the New England Conference in 1855 and was professor of systematic theology in the Methodist Episcopal Missionary Institute at Bremen, Germany. He was acting president of the Boston University of Theology, president of Boston University, and dean of Boston University School of Theology. After 1873, he was also professor of comparative theology and philosophy of religion. So as you can see, Mr. Warren had a pretty deep and in-depth background when it came down to trying to understand, or the understanding of God or divinity via his theological credentials. And then as we can see, when it comes down to understanding our origins, you're going to have some type of background in research, academia, and theology. They go in tandem. Can't separate them. All right, so it says that he has published The True Key of Ancient Cosmology, 1882. 1885, the book that we're reading, which is The Paradise Found, The Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole. The Quest of the Perfect Religion, 1886. And The Footsteps of Arminius, 1888. The Story of Gaudi, 1890. Religions of the World and the World Religion, 1900. The Earliest Cosmologies, 1909. And the universe is pictured in Milton's Paradise Lost. Okay. It says, when Boston University was chartered in 1869, he helped make it the first university in the country fully open to women. So once again, we spoke in one of our last lessons about how Frederick Douglass, part of the abolitionist movement, was in support of women's suffrage movement, for the rights of women. And now we see that Mr. Warren end up helping, or made it possible for Boston University to be the first university in the country to be fully open to women. All right, so these are pretty big milestones or feats that the country is taking place at this time. He also helped create Wellesley College in 1870. He was the brother of Henry White Warren. He, in 1861, married Harriet Merrick Warren, the first editor of the Heathen Woman's Friend. He died at his home in Brookline, Massachusetts, December 7th, 1929, at the age of 96. Wow, he got up there. Okay. And then, so we know a little bit about Mr. Warren. Now we just want to take a quick look into the book Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, because that's one of the first books that popped up in regards to his work. So it says, Warren wrote a book promoting his belief that the original center of mankind once sat at the North Pole, entitled Paradise Found, the Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, in 1885. In this work, Warren placed Atlantis at the North Pole, as well as the Garden of Eden, Mount Meru, Avalon, and the Hyperborea. Warren believed all these mythical lands were folk memories of a former inhabited far northern sea where man was originally created. Warren's identification of Atlantis with the North Pole was maintained by positioning Atlas in the far north by mapping out ancient Greek cosmology. Warren equated the primordial Titan Atlas of Greek mythology, who supported the heavens on his shoulders, or supported the earth on a pillar, to the Atlas described in Plato's dialogue Critias as the first ruler of Atlantis. In Warren's view, the axis mundi, or cosmic axis of ancient legends, example the Yggdrasil, the Irminsul, and Atlas pillar, all had to be in the far north at the top of the world. All right, so we've heard also too before about the world tree, the ancient large trees, that he said that historically existed on this planet. And they said that the tree at the North Pole which is now the Black Mountain. Do we know that for sure? We can't prove it. Can we speculate? Absolutely. We can all have speculation all day long, which is a good thing, especially to keep us on our toes as humans. Until we can actually know the truth, having this speculation is good until we can start uncovering. So it keeps us in the exploration mode. All right, always keeping that fire and that drive to know more. And in this case, we need to know our origins. All right, so it says, so to locate these in right mutual relations, one must begin by representing to himself the earth as a sphere or spheroid, and as situated within the concentric with the starry sphere, each having its axis perpendicular and its north pole at the top. The pole star is thus in the true zenith. All right, so the pole star is the zenith of our solar, or of our reality here on planet Earth. And the heavenly heights centering about it are the abode of the supreme God and the gods. So once again, we all know that the stories say that the gods or the creators dwell amongst us in the North Pole. Reason why we have what we call Aurora Borealis. It's pretty much supposed to be God's throne. It's giving off lights and energy, blah, blah, blah. But it's all beautiful to know because it has some type of truth and validity in that information that hopefully we're going to be able to uncover once we read into what Warren wrote in the Paradise Found. So Warren noted how Homer, Virgil, and Hesiod all placed Atlas or his world pillar at the ends of the earth, meaning in his view the far northern Arctic regions, while Euripides related Atlas to the pole star. Therefore, in Warren's view, Atlantis sat in the far north, at the North Pole, since the Atlas in his ancient Greek cosmological mapping stood in the far northern zenith under the pole star. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, an Indian nationalist and historian, quotes extensively from this book and presents his own studies of Vedas and Persian Avesta in his book, The Arctic Home in the Vedas, arguing for the presence of ancient humans in the Arctic. All right, pause. And so before we start going off into the Paradise Found, I'm just going to go ahead and speak a little bit in regards to the Arctic Home in the Vedas, because I did read a little bit of this, and it kind of stems into, which we're going to be talking about now, but it stems into some of my other research in regards to, like I said, our origin story, especially when you start trying to understand the ancient Vedics, or what called the Vedas, which they call the knowledge or the book of information or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my tongue because there's a lot of information I'm trying to say at the moment. But the Vedas are, like they say, the four oldest foundation scriptures of Hinduism, and they were written in archaic Sanskrit between 1500 to 500 BCE. They include the Rig Veda, which are hymns, the Samaveda, which are chants, the Yajur Veda, which are rituals, and the Atharva Veda, which are spells, and regarded as divine knowledge, they call Shruti. They divine Hindu Dharma through hymns, philosophy, and rituals, forming the basis of Hindu belief. So that's what the Vedas are. And the Vedas, they say, are written by those who are known as Aryans, the Aryan race. I'm not speaking in regards to like a so-called superior race that, was done at the time of Hitler, but the Aryan race was considered the original race here on the planet. And where they come from is a place that they call Arya. And we know Arya or Eri in ancient Iranian means noble. And then also in Celtic language, they have the same term that means free man, similar to Eri or Aryans, named Ari. So there's a connection or combination of which we're noticing when it comes down to a link between the Celts, who are also still Indo-European, to the so-called ancient Aryans, which, as we read the book the Phoenician origin of the Anglo-Saxons, Scots, and Britons. So all of this is actually making sense, but we needed to know the origins of what they came from, aka the Aryans, and it's now kind of starting to show us that the location or the territory from the Arctic home invaders is actually the North Pole. But we're going to explore all of these hypotheses as we reread and discuss together, because no one knows for sure. A lot of, like I said, speculation, but now is the time for us to actually start, truly investigating to uncover our, like I said, our mysterious past. All right, so let's go ahead and get to reading. Don't forget, brothers and sisters, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. If this is your first time in hearing this information, I want you, brothers and sisters, to start trying to, stay consistent and, and on track with this stuff, because it's like we're on a journey and you can fall off the path very easy and get left. And so you have to start seeing life that way, like you're in a simulation, you're in a game. Either you can continue to keep being which they call a stock character, you're just there just to be there, or you can actually truly become a main character, which we all are technically main characters, and you take control of your life, pick up the script, start reading, start understanding how this world truly works, and then you can start making some changes based off of that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right. All right, so preface. Second. Excuse me. So it said, this book is not the work of a dreamer, neither has it proceeded from a love of learned paradox, nor yet is it a cunningly devised fable aimed at particular tendencies in current science, philosophy, or religion. It is a thoroughly serious and sincere attempt to present what is, to the author's mind, the true and final solution of one of the greatest and most fascinating of all problems connected with the history of mankind. All right, so like he said, this is not something that's supposed to be taken lightly. This is serious. And a lot of people put their lives on the line to get the truth in regards to the origins of mankind, or I'm going to say humanity. Of course, there's a lot of, nuances where it comes down to the term man and mankind, but for the sake of this live, we're going to use mankind as the humanity as a whole. So what this true solution has not been furnished before is not strange. That this true solution has not been furnished before is not strange. The suggestion that primitive Eden was at the Arctic pole seems at first sight the most incredible of all wild and willful paradoxes, and it is only within the lifetime of our own generation that the progress of geological discovery has relieved the hypothesis of fatal antecedent improbability. Moreover, when one considers the enormous variety and breadth of the fields from which its evidences of truth must be derived, when one remembers how recent are those comparative sciences on whose results the argument must chiefly depend, when one observes that many of the most striking of our alleged proofs, both in the physical and in the anthropological domain, are precisely the latest of the conclusions of these most modern of all sciences, it is easy to see that a generation ago the demonstration here attempted could not have been given, Even 5 years ago, some of the most interesting and cogent of our arguments would as yet have been lacking. The interest which has so long invested our problem and which has prompted so many attempts to solve it was never greater than today. The lapse of centuries has rendered many another question antiquated, but not this. On the contrary, the more the modern world has advanced in new knowledge, the more exigent has grown the necessity of finding a valid solution. Men are feeling as never before that until the starting point of human history can be determined, the historian, the archaeologist, and the paleontological anthropologist are all working in the dark. Exactly. It is seen that without this Zeterathon, the ethnologist, the philologist, the mythographer, the theologian, the sociologist, can none of them construct anything not liable to profound modification, if not to utter overthrow, the moment any new light shall be thrown upon the mothered region and the prehistoric movements of the human race. Every anthropological science, therefore, and every science related to anthropology, seems at the present moment to be standing in a state of dubident expectancy, willing to work a little tentatively, but conscious of its destitution of the needful primal datum and conscious of its consequent lack of a valid structural law. To the believer in revelation, or even in the most ancient and venerable ethnic traditions, the volume here presented will be found to possess uncommon interest. For many years, the public mind has been schooled in a narrow naturalism, which has in its worldview as little room for the extraordinary as it has for the supernatural. Decade after decade, the representatives of this teaching have been measuring the natural phenomena of every age and of every place by the petty measuring rod of their own local and temporary experience. So long and so successfully have they dogmatized on the constancy of nature's laws and the uniformity of nature's forces that of late it has required no small degree of courage to enable an intelligent man to stand up in the face of his generation and avow his personal faith in the early existence of men of gigantic stature and of almost millenarian longevity. Especially have clergymen and Christian teachers and writers upon biblical history been embarrassed by the popular incredulity on these subjects, and not infrequently by a consciousness that this incredulity was in some measure shared by themselves. To all such, and indeed to all the broader minded among the naturalists themselves, a new philosophy of primeval history, a philosophy which, for all the alleged extraordinary effects provides the adequate extraordinary causes cannot fail to prove, must welcome the execution of the plan of the book as by no means all that the author could desire. To the elaboration of so vast an argument, the materials for which must be gleaned from every possible field of knowledge, the broadest and profoundest scholar might well devote the undistracted labor of a lifetime. To the writer, loaded with the cares of a laborious executive office, there were lacking both the leisure and the equipment otherwise attainable for so high a task. The best he could do was to turn 1 or 2 summer vacations into work time and give the result to the world. Of the correctness of his position he has no doubt, and of the preparedness of the scientific world to accept it, he is also confident. To the foregoing remarks, it may be proper to add that apart from its immediate purpose, the book has interest, and it is hoped value as a contribution to the infant science of comparative mythology. By the application of the author's true key to ancient cosmology and mythical geography, it has been possible to adjust and interpret a great variety of ancient cosmological and geographical notions never before understood by modern scholars. For example, the origin and the significance of the Shinvat Bridge are here for the first time explained. The indication of the polycentric character common to the mythical systems of sacred geography. among all ancient peoples will probably be new to every reader. The new light thrown upon such questions as those relating to the direction of the sacred quarter, the location of the abode of the dead, the character and positioning of the cosmical tree, and the course of the backward flowing ocean river, the correlation of the navels of earth and heaven, not to enumerate other points, can hardly fail to attract the lively attention of all students and teachers of ancient mythology and mythical geography. To teachers of Homer, the fresh contributions toward a right understanding of Homeric cosmology are sure to prove of value. And if, in the end, the work may only lead to a systematic and intelligent teaching of the long neglected but most important science of ancient cosmology and mythical geography in all reputable universities and classical schools, it will surely not have been written in vain. That the author has escaped all errors and oversights while ranging through so numerous and such diverse fields of investigation, many of which are but just open to the pioneering specialist, is too much to expect. He only asks that any such blemishes which a more competent scholarship may detect, or which the progress of new learning may yet bring to light, may not be allowed to prejudice the force of true arguments, but may be pointed out in the spirit of a candid and helpful criticism. In conclusion, the author respectively commits his work to all truth-seeking spirits, not less to the patient investigators of nature than to the students of history, of literature, and of religion. Particularly would he commend it to all those yearning and waiting, Königsschänen, whose experience has been described by Hans Andersen in the words "Es Word Animal in Königsschän, Niemand hatte so wilvel and schon bukker we Alles was in this werd geschaffen, kan het daarin lassen, die uitbedongen en praktiken, kurzfristigen obliken van janden voke." And I'm probably messing this up, but I'm trying my best, so I'm just gonna go to skip that. So it says, so the saying being interpreted reads as follows. Once upon a time there was a king's son. Nobody had so many and such beautiful books as he. In these all that had ever happened to the world he could read and see depicted in splendid engravings. Of every people and of every land could he get information, but as to where the Garden of Eden was, not a word was to be found therein. And this, just this it was, on which he meditated most of all. All right, so the Garden of Eden, the location of human origins, all of this has been something that's been on humans, on humanity's search list. And it seems, based off of Mr. Warren's research, as seriously as he's taken it, he has been able to find that location, which we call the North Pole. So we're going to go ahead and continue to keep moving forward from off the preface. Part 1, I'm not going to go through all of these chapters. There's a lot of them, and we're not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to go through just specific ones that really is pinpointing what we're looking for in regards to the title of this book. All right, so you can see chapter 1. Some of topics: Columbus approaching the gate, the report of Sir John de Mandeville, adventures of Prince Eric, the voyages of Saint Brandon and of Ogre, the success of the author of the Book of Enoch, and Equestrian's Anticipations, David Livingstone, the searcher for Eden, and unanimous verdict, known as Adventus. Chapter 2, the results of theologians. See those. We're going to start want to say this page. We're going to go and start part 2, the primitive, fresh hypothesis, primitive Eden at the North Pole, chapter 1. All right, that's on page 47. Page 47. The hypothesis. All right, so it says, the golden guest is morning star to the full round of truth, Tennyson. All right, so from the foregoing chapters, it would seem as if nearly every imaginable site for the God or the Gan Eden of Genesis had been proposed, examined, and found unavailable. One, however, remains, a region of rarest interest in astronomical, physical, and historical geography, the natural center of the only historic hemisphere. Considering the fascination of the subject and the inexhaustible ingenuity that has been expended upon it, it seems remarkable that it should be left to the closing years of the 19th century to bring forth and seriously to test the proposition that the cradle of the human race, the Eden of primitive tradition, was situated at the North Pole in a country submerged at the time of the deluge. All right, so they're saying that the North Pole pretty much became frozen or under ice during the time of the deluge. All right, and we can say during the time of the deluge, before it was considered the antediluvian period, when when the planet was ran by giants. And that's something, especially as us English people, recognize in our history, in our myths, our mythos. So it says, as to the alleged newness of the above hypothesis, it is proper to say that something like a year elapsed after its full acceptance and public announcement by the writer, before he can find any evidence that it had been entertained or advocated by any other person. He then met with the illusion in the passage quoted from Bishop Hewitt as a model to chapter 2 of the preceding part, and with a similar illusion in an anonymous article in Dickens All the Year Round. Whether these were more than rhetorical flourishes, he was long in doubt. Not until after the manuscript of the present work had been completed, packed, and addressed to the publishers. This is the hypothesis which it is proposed in the following pages to examine, and according to the evidences to a judge. We propose to make the test both strict and comprehensive. Hypothesis, however promising, must be brought face to face with reality. Ours, like its numberless predecessors, must be rejected if the solid facts of any of the following sciences show that it's inadmissible. So once again, they're utilizing science to present their claim in regards to the location of, our the cradle of the human race. So this is not just off of abstract, feelings, or theories in regards to how they're coming up with the conclusion. They're literally doing the numbers. Okay. All right, so excuse me, apologize. So like it says, number 1, general geogony, or the science of the origin of the earth. This is something that a lot of people don't realize, that the planet itself has an origin, and this is a science that we need to study to understand. 2, mathematical or astronomical geography, particularly its teachings as to the inhabitableness or the uninhabitableness of the circumpolar region with respect to light. 3, physiographical geology, particularly its teachings as the probability or improbability of the former existence and subsequent submersion of a circumpolar country. 4, prehistoric climatology, particularly with reference to the temperature at the pole at the time of the beginning of the human history. 5, paleontological botany. 6, paleontological zoology. 7, paleontological anthropology and ethnology. And 8, comparative mythology, viewed as the science. Was the doubt resolved by finding in an anonymous English magazine article of more than 30 years ago this brief statement. It says, Pastellus will have it that the paradise was under the North Pole. Who Pastellus was and what he wrote upon the subject remained to be investigated. Suffice to say that up to the date of this writing, the author has found no book or tractate in which the above hypothesis have ever been advocated. This fact renders some of the mottos prefixed to the chapters farther on remarkably significant and impressive. In many cases, their authors express truths which they themselves did not perceive. Now, it's mighty peculiar that they don't even speak about, the origins of the human race potentially still coming from the North Pole, even as we can see now how the North Pole seemed to be the fastest warming location on the planet at this very moment. The North Pole is heating up faster than any other location on the planet. So to come to this information during the time of what we're living in is very important and very insightful. We need to kind of really start paying attention to, what not only we're going to be reading, but what's actually taking place, because of, we want to get to the bottom of our origins and what's going on. Never leave these questions to someone else to try to answer for you. Try to find out yourself. So like it says, so them themselves not to perceive, and the science of the oldest traditionary beliefs and memories of mankind. On the contrary, if the hypothesis is capable of meeting this eightfold test, and especially if we can show not only that it is admissible, but also that in greater or less degree it is supported by the positive evidence of the facts in nearly all of these fields of knowledge, we shall afford a much more complete and convincing verification than is at all usual in matters of prehistoric research. So like you said, there's an eightfold test that they're doing to corroborate with the claim in regards to, like I said, the cradle of the human race at the North Pole. All right, Chapter 2. Important new features at once introduced to the problem of the site of Eden. Significance of these for a valid solution. It appears then to be a condition of a genuinely scientific hypothesis that it be not destined always to remain an hypothesis, but be certain to be either proved or disproved by that comparison with observed facts, which is termed verification. Verification is proof. If the supposition accords with the phenomena, there needs no other evidence of it. And that's John Stuart Mill. So once again, you need evidence, brothers and sisters. Evidence is itself is verification of proof, and verification itself is proof. So let's go ahead and read. It says, it is the evident on a moment's thought that our hypothesis immediately and materially modifies the whole problem of the location of paradise. Given the prehistoric circumpolar continent at the North Pole as the cradle of the race, what must have been marked and memorable features of that primitive abode? 1. To the first men there would have been but 1 day and 1 night in a year. So once again, there was only 1 day and 1 night. Because out of 6 months of the year, it will be daylight. The next 6 months will be nighttime. The stars, instead of seeming to rise and set, would have had an apparently horizontal motion, round and round the observer from left to right. So, like I said, if you lived at the North Pole, the stars wouldn't move the way that we see them in our locations now. They would just move left to right, like a circle. Like a circle, just left to right, miracle round. 3. The pole, the unmoving center point of the heavens directly overhead, would naturally have seemed to be the top of the world, the true heaven, the changeless seat of the supreme, all-ruling God. And if, accordingly, through all the long lifetime of antediluvian world, the circumpolar sky was to human thought the true abode of God, the oldest post-diluvian peoples, though scattered down the sides of the globe, half or 2/3 the distance to the equator, could not easily have forgotten that at the center and true top of the rotating sky was the throne of its great creator, and that there in the far north was the sacred quarter of the world. All right, so once again, which this can make a lot of sense, especially when you kind of think about the locations of the people on the planet and how we are, like I said, we scattered to the 4 corners of the world. So the 4 corners of the world in this case will be the continents. After we left from the Great Deluge, from the above location of the planet itself, and that would be considered the polar north. And during this time, it wasn't considered cold; it was tropical prior to prior to the Great Deluge. This was a tropical location. All right, and so it says next, standing at the pole of the earth, an observer will be not only directly under the center of this celestial hemisphere, but also directly on the center of the surface of the terrestrial hemisphere. There and there alone, the heavenly bodies would move in horizontal planes round and round him everywhere at an apparently equal distance, and he will seem to himself to stand on the one precise center point of the entire earth. So that means that all of the heavenly bodies above, everything pretty much will be spinning around you when you're at the location of the center of the North Pole, which means that if everything is spinning around Earth, I'm just going off a tangent, I would say that everything technically would have to be here, almost like in an enclosed environment. So every departure of a few miles in any direction from this polar position would at once confirm this first impression. If therefore primeval Eden was at the pole, the descendants of the first man going away from such an original country could hardly have failed to remember it as the center of all lands, the umphalos of the world, the umphalos of the whole earth. All right, so like they say, the original man could not have forgot where we come from, especially if that was considered the main location of the planet. And umphalos just means a sacred rounded stone artifact that was, tied back into Greek mythology, and it was specifically located in the temple of Apollo at Delphi, marking it the center of the earth. All right, so the center of the earth itself, or like they say, the umphalos, is the North Pole. Supposing the first man to have been located in the central and most elevated portion of the hypothetical Eden land, the streams there originating and flowing seaward would have flowed, not in one, but in various opposite directions toward all the cardinal points of the horizon. Moreover, all of these streams being obviously fed, not by each other, but by the rain from heaven, it would not have required a very powerful imagination to conceive of them as parts of a finer and more celestial stream, whose head strings were in the sky, if finally the streams flowing in opposite directions, grew at length into 4 opposite flowing rivers, Lumina Principalia, as many old theologians have called them, dividing the circumpolar land into 4 nearly equal quarters. It would have constituted a never to be forgotten feature of that first home of man. So, like I said, and which we can kind of see with our cross, which is a representation of the 4 corners, which ties us back to the location of, like they call it, the Mundi axis, which is the center of the planet itself. So all of the religions that many of us don't, or many people don't understand, are all tied together, going back to the original location of where man comes from, which is the Arctic or the polar north. But we're going to investigate that, hopefully either in this video or maybe in the future. 6. In another chapter, we shall expose the baselessness of the popular impression that at the poles 6 months of every 12 are spent in darkness, and shall show that, on the contrary, less than 1/5 of the year is so spent, while more than 4/5 are spent in light. Alright, so they're saying that it's not that many days of darkness has actually been experienced up there in the north, as we have been, popular belief has had told us. Instead, it's actually more light and less darkness. So, from what I can tell or from this, it's almost like it's a perpetual vegetation or perpetual veg like goes on up north compared to the solar north, the polar north or the Arctic north, historically compared to what we have been told or led to believe. So it says, so this being true, a primitive abode in that part of the world will have been remembered by the descendants of the first man as preeminently a land of beauty, preeminently the home of the sun. Moreover, Arctic explorers find it impossible to describe the nocturnal splendors of the aurora borealis in those regions. The whole top of the globe oftentimes seeming veiled in and over canopied with quivering curtains and banners and streamers of leaping flame. It is therefore easy to believe that once exiled from such a home, mankind would ever have looked back to it as to an abode of unearthly and preternatural effulgence, a home fit for the occupancy of gods and holy immortals. So they're pretty much saying that at the time, which we call the location of the North Pole, it was beautiful. It was paradise. Like they say, it was a heaven on earth. And it was made for holy immortals and gods. What are the odds? Because that's all that we hear about these locations. Like even from the Golden Age, that was ruled by who we call the Great Father, also known as Saturn El, who's known as who? The primeval sun, the first sun. All right, so he was the son that actually ruled, or who they also call as the creator. 7. Finally, assuming the prevalence of an equable tropical temperature, we find the biological conditions of the region, such as the extraordinary prevalence of daylight, the intenser terrestrial magnetism, and the unparalleled electric forces which feed the northern lights, all combining to raise a high probability that if ever such a land as we have supposed existed, it must have presented forms of life surpassing those with which we are familiar, a flora and fauna of almost unimagined vigor and luxuriance of development. So because of the energy, the light, the location, like I'm explaining, or like I'm saying, at this of the North Pole thing, there was different life. It's probably the best way to explain it. Different creatures, things develop completely different than in our locations that we're living now, like America, Europe, Australia, Africa, Asia. None of these places had the same, as we can see today, the same bigger and, like they say, luxuriance of development than what the North Pole at this time, because of all of the energy that comes from up there, that it still gets to this day, just not in the same fashion and form as it was prior to the Great Deluge. But nevertheless, as we can even see on our planet itself, when we have the Aurora Borealis taking place, we now starting to see them in such further locations compared to when we were growing up. You only really heard about the Northern Lights reaching pretty much only the northern hemisphere of the planet. We didn't really start hearing and see the lights all the way down to almost like Atlanta and stuff like that, which is bizarre, but interesting times that we're living in. So it's almost like you cannot not expect these type of ordeals taking place. So it says under such, excuse me, give me 1 second. So hopefully those of you who are watching the live who are still here, please leave a comment. Let me know that you're paying attention, you're intrigued with what you're listening to. You know, always, like I said, try to chime in, try to let me know, you know, that you're present. And don't forget to give me some thumbs up. You know, don't forget to like the video, especially if you were here listening. You know, like the video. Don't just be a spectator. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So it says, under such conditions, men themselves may well have had a stature and strength and longevity never attained since the deluge, which destroyed the world that then was, and immediately or ultimately occasioned the translocation of the seed of our new post-diluvian humanity into the cold and barren and desolate regions of the northern temperate zone. So like they said, the humans and the people during this time in that location, which we can also see in our minds were like heroes, heroines. This is what those stories come from, those myths about, like I said, the gods and goddesses of renown. You know, this is the location where they dwell. You know, this is the reason why they say they were able to get to those type of conditions. It's because of the conditions of, you know, the energy in the territory of the polar north before the great deluge took place. And if the first men were of the stature and strength and longevity supposed, how certainly would traditions of the fact linger in the memory of mankind long after its exile from its earlier and happier home. So they're saying we were way happier, which it makes sense if this is the golden age. We were way happier when we were here. You know, ever since we left this location, or ever since we fell, we have been suffering. We have been in sorrow, we have been in pain, and we have been trying to understand what happened. Like, we literally forgot. Like, humanity literally forgot. But because we still have the essence and the blood from the original people who come from there, there's something within us that's trying to pull us or call us back home. It's trying to put us back together. And that's why I feel we're getting insight or having a conscious upgrade or visions to bring us to this conclusion. And I'm telling you now, like, a lot of the stuff that we're going to be reading together, a lot of it's going to be even new for me. So we're all going to be going, or I won't say all, but those of us who are paying attention and focusing what's going on, going to be going through a conscious upgrade reading this information. All right, so let's continue. So glancing back now over these various points, one instantly sees that they present conditions of human existence totally unlike the conditions of life as we know it, or as it has ever been known in what are called historic ages. they necessarily modify in the profoundest manner the whole problem of the site of Eden. No solution ever heretofore presented exposed itself to refutation at so many points. None ever before postulated so extraordinary an adjustment of both heavens and earth. None ever before required, in order to its establishment, so incredibly wide a concurrence of testimony. Against no other has it ever been possible for the very stars and their courses to fight. If false, it demands of human tradition shadowy recollections of world conditions which have never existed in human experience. An hypothesis so peculiarly difficult must surely break down if it be not true, promising the reader therefore not a new ignis fatuus chase, but at least the satisfaction of a definite result. As respects one hypothesis, we cordially invite his critical and patient attention to the facts to be presented in the following chapters. All right, here's part 3, the hypothesis scientifically tested and confirmed. Testimony, scientific geogamy, astronomical geography, physiographical geology, prehistoric climatology, paleontological botany, paleontological zoology, and paleontological anthropology and ethnology. And conclusion of this part. It says, it follows that man issuing from a mother region, still undetermined, but which a number of considerations indicate to have been in the north, has radiated in several directions, that his migrations have been constantly from north to south. So they're saying that our migrations constantly from historical times, which we know also too, from those of us who are heavily melanated, like we migrated from the north to the south because we were constantly trying to follow the sun to stay warm. All of a sudden now people don't migrate no more north and south any longer, which is a shame. All right, so chapter 1, the testimony of geogamy, or the science of the origin of the earth. Could it once be proven that the Arctic terminus of the earth has always been the ice-bound region which it now is, and which for thousands of years it has been, it would of course be useless to entertain for a moment the hypothesis that the cradle of the human race was there located. Probably the popular impression that from the beginning of the world, the far north has been the region of unendurable cold has been one of the chief reasons why our hypothesis is so late in claiming attention. At the present time, however, so far as this difficulty is concerned, scientific studies have abundantly prepared the way for the new theory. That the earth is slowly cooling body is a doctrine now all but universally accepted. In saying this, we say nothing for it or against the so-called nebular hypothesis of the origin of the world, for both friends and foes of this unproven hypothesis believe in what is termed the circular cooling or refrigeration of the earth. All authorities in this field hold and teach that the time was when the slowly solidifying planet was too hot to support any form of life, and that only at some particular time in the cooling process was there a temperature reached which was adapted to the necessities of living things. On what portion of the Earth's surface now would this temperature first be reached? Or it everywhere be reached at the same time? These are most interesting questions, and the writer has often marveled that in scientific treatises on the cooling globe he could nowhere find them formally discussed, granting, however, a uniform interior heat and a uniform loss of it in the mode of superficial radiation in all directions into space. It is certain that if these were the only factors in the problem, the cooling process would affect every part of the surface in a uniform manner, and we might confidently infer that the temperature compatible with organic life was reached at the same time at all points of the Earth's surface. But the factors named are not the only ones of the problem. In those far-off geologic ages, the heat received from the great central furnace of our system, the sun, could not have been less than at the present time, when the Earth's atmosphere became penetrable by the rays of the sun. Local differences of temperature must have been produced at the base of the atmosphere, whether the body of the globe was as yet crusted over or not. Then as now, viewed apart from air and water currents, every particular spot on the surface of the globe must have had a temperature determined, first by the fixed and uniform inherent heat of the Earth's mass, and secondly, by the varying quantity of heat received from the sun. But the difference between the solar heat received at the point under the equator and that received at a point at the pole could not have been less in those ages than at the present time. And this incessant increment of the equatorial heat of the Earth by the direct rays of the sun suggests at once the portions of the globe to which we must look if we would find regions which first became cool enough to sustain organic life. Then, as now, the polar regions must have been cooler than the equatorial, and hence, as far as the teachings of theoretical geogony can be trusted, the conclusion is inevitable that there, to wit, in the polar regions, life first became possible. So once again, from geogony's standpoint, that the polar regions was the location of which organic life first started, or where life first became possible. The bearing of this result upon our central thesis is at once obvious. We ask the geologist this question: is the hypothesis of a primeval polar Eden admissible? Looking at the slowly cooling Earth alone, he replies, Eden conditions have probably at one time or another been found everywhere upon the surface of the Earth. Paradise may have been anywhere. Looking at the cosmic environment, however, he adds, but while paradise may have been anywhere, the first portions of the Earth's surface sufficiently cool to present the conditions of Eden life were assuredly at the poles. Chapter 2, The Testimony of Astronomical Geography. The nights are never so dark at the pole as in other regions, for the moon and the stars seem to possess twice as much light and effulgence. In addition, there is a continuous light in the north, the varied shades and play of which are amongst the strangest phenomena of nature. And that's come from Rambus and Astronomy. And then the fact which gives the phenomena of the polar aurora its greatest importance is that the Earth becomes self-luminous, that besides the light which as at a planet it receives from the central body, it shows the capability of sustaining a luminous process proper to itself. Humboldt. So now we're going to understand the testimony and their case or their claim, like they say, from an astronomical geography standpoint. So we just came from geogony, now we're going to go to astronomical geography. We are apt to think of an unbroken night of 6 months at the pole. Eminent scientific authorities speak as if this conception were correct. Thus, Professor Geikie, in his admirable new manual of geology, writing of the Arctic flora of the Miocene age, says, when we remember that this vegetation grew luxuriantly within 8 degrees 15 feet of the North Pole, in a region which is in the darkness for half of the year, we can realize the difficulty of the problem in the distribution of climate which these facts present to the geologist. In like manner, Sir Charles Lyell, discussing the question of the possibility of whales reaching the supposed open sea at the pole, says, they could pass under considerable barriers of ice, provided there were openings here and there, and so they may, perhaps, reach a more open sea near the pole. and find sustenance there during a day of more than 5 months' duration. From such representation as these, the reader naturally carries away the impression that daylight lasts at the pole somewhat over 5 months, while all the rest of the year the region is shrouded in darkness. Were this true, it would certainly be an unpromising region in which to search for the terrestrial paradise. Fortunately for our hypothesis, this conception of the duration of the polar night is very far from true. The half-yearly reign of darkness exists only in the uninstructed imagination. Astronomical geography teaches that, as respects daylight, the polar regions are and always have been the most favored portions of the globe. As early as popularizer of natural science as the Reverend Thomas Dick set forth the real facts as follows: under the poles, where the darkness of night will continue 6 months without intermission if there were no refraction, total darkness does not prevail, 1/2 of this period. When the sun sets at the North Pole about the 23rd of September, the inhabitants of any enjoy a perpetual aurora till he has descended 18 degrees below the horizon. In his course through the ecliptic, the sun is 2 months before he can reach this point, during which time there is a perpetual twilight. In 2 months more he arrives again at the same point, namely 18 degrees below the horizon, when a new twilight commences, which is continually increasing in brilliancy for other 2 months, at the end of which the body of this luminary is seen rising in all its glory, so that in this region the light of the day is enjoyed in a greater or less degree for 10 months, without interruption by the effects of atmospheric refraction, and during the 2 months when the influence of the solar light is entirely withdrawn, the moon is shining above the horizon for 2 months without intermission, and thus it happens that no more than 2 separate fortnights are passed in total darkness, and this darkness is alleviated by the light of the stars and the frequent coruscations of the aurora borealis. Hence it appears that there are no portions of our globe which enjoy throughout the year so large a portion of the solar light as these northern regions. So, pause. So they're explaining that the northern regions, or the North Pole itself, gets about 10 months worth of actually sunlight or solar light, and the other 2 months is moonlight. And when the moon is not out, they're receiving the light from the stars as well as the aurora borealis. So the northern or the North Pole receives the most light technically in the world, according to this book. So striking as is in this account of the polar day, it is noteworthy that experience has repeatedly shown that the actual duration of light in high latitudes exceeds even the calculations of the astronomers. Thus, in the spring of 1873, the officers of the Austrian expedition under Lieutenants Weyprecht and Payer were surprised to behold the sun 3 days before the date on which he was expected to rise. A late writer thus states the case: in the latitude of 79 degrees 15 degrees north, in which the Tethegoth was lying, the sun ought to reappear above the horizon on the 19th of February. But owing to an effect of a refraction due to the low temperature prevailing, 30 degrees, the explorers were able to salute its rays 3 days earlier. Lieutenant Payer's own account is as follows: though the sun did not return to our latitude 78 degrees 15 north, 71 degrees 38 east longitude till the 19th of February, we were able to greet his beams 3 days previous to that date, owing to the strong refraction of 1 degree, which accompanied a temperature of 30 degrees right, or R. Still more remarkable was the experience of Barent's Arctic expedition almost 300 years ago. Dr. Dick alludes to it as follows: the refractive power of the atmosphere has been found to be much greater in certain cases than what has now been stated. In the year 1595, 1596-97, a company of Dutch sailors, having been wrecked on the shores of Novaya Zemlya and having been obliged to remain in that desolate region during a night of more than 3 months, it was a little less than 3 months, beheld the sun make its appearance in the horizon about 16 days before the time in which he should have risen according to calculation, and when his body was actually more than 4 degrees below the horizon. The only explanation of this astonishing phenomenon, which the same writer offers, is found in this appended clause, which circumstance has been attributed to the great refractive power of the atmosphere in those intensely cold regions. This is so unsatisfactory that not a few prefer to believe what seems entirely incredible, namely that Barentz and his men in a short space of less than 3 months made a blunder of 16 days in their time record. Professor Nordenskjold has recently referred to the case as follows. On the 14th of November, the sun disappeared and was again visible on February 3rd to January 24th. These dates have caused scientific men much perplexity because in latitude 76 degrees north, the upper edge of the sun ought to have ceased to be visible. When the sun's south declination, autumn became greater than 13 degrees, and to have become visible again when the declination again became less than that figure. That is to say, the sun ought to have been seen for the last time at Barents Ice Haven on October 17th, 27th, and it ought to have appeared again there on February 4th to the 14th. It has been supposed that the deviation arose from a considerable error in counting the days, but this was unanimously denied by the crew who wintered. In a footnote, he gives proofs which seem convincing that no such error can have been committed. But while these experiences of Barents and the Austrians point to a duration of darkness at the pole of less than 60 days out of the 365, some apparently good authorities extend the period to 76 or 77 days. Thus, Captain Bedford Pym of the Royal Navy of Great Britain makes the following statement. On the 16th of March, the sun rises, preceded by a long dawn of 47 days, namely from the 29th of January, when the first glimmer of light appears. On the 25th of September, the sun sets, and after a twilight of 48 days, namely on the 13th of November, darkness reigns supreme. So far as the sun is concerned, for 76 days, followed by one long period of light, the sun remaining above the horizon 194 days. The year, therefore, is thus divided at the pole: 194 days of sun, 76 days of darkness, 47 days of dawn, 48 days of twilight. Even according to this account, we should have at least the pole only 76 days of darkness to 289 days of light in the year. In other words, instead of being in darkness little short of half of the time, as at the equator, one would be in darkness, but about 1/4 of the time. As far as light is concerned, therefore, even on this calculation, the polar region is twice as favorable to life as any equatorial region that can be named. But whence this discrepancy among the astronomers? Why should some of them make the polar night 16 days longer than others? The simple answer is that they proceed upon different assumptions as to atmospheric refraction in the region of the pole. In our latitude, twilight is usually reckoned to begin when the center of the rising sun is yet 18 degrees below the horizon. Starting with this as the limit and counting sunrise and sunset to be the moments when the sun's upper limb is on the horizon, we arrive at the division of the polar year given by Captain Pym. But astronomers say that in England, twilight has been observed when the sun was 21 degrees below the horizon. To be entirely safe, some therefore are taking 20 degrees as the limit of solar depression, and reckoning with this datum instead of the 18 degrees before mentioned, have found that at the pole, the morning twilight would begin January 20th, and the evening twilight would cease November 21st. This will make the period of darkness but 60 days, and the period of light 305. Thus, a difference of only 2 degrees in the assumed limit of solar suppression at the beginning and end of the twilight makes the difference of 16 days, and the supposed duration of darkness. Which of the two calculations, writes an eminent American mathematician, is the more correct is known, I imagine, by no one. To us in the present discussion, the discrepancy is of very little moment. It is only a question as to whether at the pole there is daylight 3/4 or 5/6 of the year. Both suppositions may be and probably are wrong, for if in tropical climates 16 degrees or 17 degrees is said to be a sufficient allowance for the extreme solar depression, while on the other hand it is said in England to vary from 17 to 21 degrees, it certainly looks as though in yet higher latitudes the light of the sun might be discernible when its body is as much as 21 or 22 degrees below the horizon, and this would reduce the annual polar darkness to less than 50 days. This supposition is rendered more probable by the fact that while the expeditions already alluded to found much more of daylight than their astronomical calculations had led them to expect, we have no offsetting accounts where the sun was awaited in vain. The final and authoritative settlement of the question can be reached only by actual observation. Among the fascinating problems whose solution awaits the progress of arctic exploration, we must therefore place the scientific determination of the unknown duration of the polar day. In view of the foregoing, we are certainly safe in conceiving of the polar night as lasting not over 44 nights. During 2 of these, as Dick reminds us, the moon will be walking in beauty through the heavens and exhibiting all her changing phases of loveliness in unbroken successions. The other 2 will be passed beneath the starry arc of heaven, all of whose sparkling constellations will be moving around and round the observer in exactly horizontal orbits. In such a perfect and regular stellar system, kept in view so long and so continuously, the irregular movements of the planets or wandering stars could not possibly escape observation. All their curious accelerations, retardations, conjunctions, declinations will be perfectly marked and measured on the revolving but changeless dial plate of the remoter sky. Dwelling in such a natural observatory, any people would of necessity become astronomers. And how magnificent and orderly would the ongoings of the universe appear when viewed from underneath a firmament whose center of revolution was fixed in the observer's zenith. After long months of unbroken daylight, how would one's soul yearn for a new vision of those stellar glories of the night? Nor would the moon and silent stars be the only attractions of the brief period during which the light of the sun was withdrawn. The mystic play of the northern light will transform the familiar daylight world into a veritable fairyland. In our latitude, the aurora borealis is a comparatively rare and tame phenomenon. In the highest Arctic regions, it almost nightly kindles its unearthly glories. In itself, it is lightning diluted and sublimated to the point of harmlessness. Sometimes these electric discharges not only fill the whole heaven with palpitating draperies, but also tip the hills with lambent flame and cause the very soil on which one stands to prickle with a kind of life. But after all the glories of the night begin the greater glories of the polar day. Who with any approach to adequacy has ever described the dawn? What poet has not attempted it, and what poet has not failed? But for this be impossible to picture one Here's an image of aurora borealis that he put inside the book. This is back in 1885, by the way. And they called it the night sky, the skies of Eden. All right, so belief of our brief and evanescent day dawns. Who shall attempt a description of that surpassing spectacle in which all the splendors and loveliness of 60 of our dawns are combined in one? No words can ever portray it. No poet's imagination even has ever given us such unearthly scenery. First of all appears low in the horizon of the night sky, a scarcely visible flush of light. At first it only makes a few stars' light seem a trifle fainter, After a little, it is seen to be increasing and to be moving laterally along the yet dark horizon. 24 hours later, it has made a complete circuit around the observer and is causing a larger number of stars to pale. Soon the widening light glows with the luster of orient pearl. Onward it moves in its stately rounds until the pearly whiteness burns into a ruddy rose light fringed with purple and gold. Day after day, as we measure days, this splendid panorama circles on, and according as atmospheric conditions and clouds present more or less favorable conditions of reflection, kindles and fades, fades only to kindle next time yet more brightly as the still hidden sun comes nearer and nearer his point of emergence. At length, when for 2 long months such prophetic displays have been filling the whole heavens with these increscent and revolving splendors, the sun begins to emerge from his long retirement and to display himself once more to human vision. After 1 or 2 circuits during which his dazzling upper limb grows to a full-orbed disk, he clears all hilltops of the distant horizon and 4 or 6 full months circles around and around the world's great axis in full view, suffering no night to fall upon his favorite homeland at the pole. Even when at last he sinks again from view, he covers his retreat with a repetition of the deepening and fading splendors which filled his long dawning, as if these pulses of more and more distant light he were signaling back to the forsaken world the promises and prophecies of an early return. In these prosaic sentences, we aim at no description of the indescribable. We only remind ourselves of the bald facts and conditions which govern the unpicturable transformations of each year-long polar night and day. Enough, however, has been said for our purpose. Whoever seeks as a probable location for paradise the heavenliest spot on earth with respect to light and darkness, and with respect to the celestial scenery, must be content to seek it at the Arctic Pole. Here is the true city of the sun. Here is the one and only spot on earth respecting which it would seem as if the Creator had said, as of his own heavenly residence, there should be no night there. And then after this last one, this is probably going to be the last bit I'm going to read for tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and probably start a part 2 tomorrow, so we can probably continue. If not tomorrow, it'll be the day after tomorrow. But I definitely want us to stay on to this course, because as we can see, as we has been uncovering, that not only is the North Pole the Eden of renown, Gan Eden, but it's also predicated to have more light compared to any other place on the planet, which means more night, more energy, more power, more sustenance. So we want to know how this affects us today, because if Eden or if the North Pole is heating up or warming up, we want to know how this is going to affect us and what we can do about it. As us being the heirs and descendants from this long lost race that people say disappeared, which clearly couldn't have disappeared if we're still here. And so it says, Chapter 3, the testimony of physiographical geology. Our hypothesis calls for an antediluvian continent at the Arctic Pole. So remember, the antediluvian, this means the age of the time of the giants prior to the Great Deluge of the Bible. So this is where they're saying the location is, the North Pole. It is interesting to find that a writer upon the Deluge writing more than 40 years ago advanced the same postulate. Is the supposition that there existed such a continent scientifically admissible? Until very recently, too little was known of the geology of the high latitudes to warrant or even to occasion the discussion of such a question. Even now, with all the contemporary interest in Arctic exploration, it is difficult to find any author who has distinctly propounded to himself and discussed the question as to the geologic age of the Arctic Ocean. It would not be strange, therefore, if we have here to content ourselves with showing, first, that geologists and paleontologists do not think the present distribution of Arctic sea and land to be the primeval one, and secondly, that in their opinion, incidentally expressed, a continent once existed within the Arctic Circle, of which at present only vestiges remain. We will begin with the distinguished Alfred Russel Wallace, who, in speaking of the Miocene period, presents us with a very different northern hemisphere from ours of today. For instance, in his view, Scandinavia was at that time a vast island. He says the distribution of the Eocene and the Miocene formations shows that during a considerable portion of the Tertiary period, an inland sea, more or less occupied by an archipelago of islands, extended across Central Europe between the Baltic and the Black and Caspian seas, and thence by a narrower channels southeastward to the valley of the Euphrates in the Persian Gulf, thus opening a communication between the North Atlantic and the Indian Ocean. From the Caspian, also a wide arm of the sea extended during some part of the Tertiary epoch northwards to the Arctic Ocean, and there is nothing to show that this sea may not have been in existence during the whole Tertiary period. Another channel probably existed over Egypt into the eastern basin of the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, while it is probable that there was a communication between the Baltic and the White Sea, leaving Scandinavia as an extensive island. Turning to India, we find that an arm of the sea of great width and depth extended from the Bay of Bengal to the mouths of the Indus, while the enormous depression indicated by the presence of marine fossils of Eocene age at a height of 16,500 feet in western Tibet renders it not improbable that a more direct channel across Afghanistan may have opened a communication between the West Asiatic and the polar seas. Later, in the same book, Mr. Wallace incidentally shows that the facts of Arctic paleontology call for the supposition of a primitive Eocene continent in the highest latitudes, a continent which no longer exists. His language is, the rich and varied fauna which inhabited Europe at the dawn of the Tertiary period, as shown by the abundant remains of the mammalia, wherever suitable deposits of Eocene age have been discovered, proves that an extensive Paleoarctic continent then existed. Another most eminent authority in Arctic paleontology, the late Professor Heer of Zurich, fully 15 years ago arrived at and published the conclusion that the facts presented in the Arctic fossils plainly point to the existence in Miocene time of a no longer existing polar continent. Fuller reference to his views will be made in our next chapter. On another and more lithological line of evidence, Baron Nordenskjöld, the eminent Arctic explorer, has arrived at the same conclusion. Speaking of certain rock strata north of the 69th degree of north latitude, he says an extensive continent occupied this portion of the globe when these strata were deposited. Elsewhere, he speaks of this ancient polar continent as something already accepted and universally understood among scientific men. He also alludes to the conspiring evidences of its former existence found in different departments of research. These basalt beds, he remarks, probably originated from a volcanic chain active during the Tertiary period, which perhaps limits the ancient polar continent in the same manner as now the case with the eastern coast of Asia and the western of America. This confirming the division of land and water in the Tertiary period, which upon totally different grounds have been supposed to have existed. Another authority in this field, writing of the theory that continuous land once connected Europe and North America at the north, remarks, in further support of this theory, we have the fact that no trace of the sea deposits of the Eocene age have been found in the polar area. All the vestiges of strata remaining showing that these latitudes were then occupied by dry land. Finally, as our assumption of the earlier existence of a circumpolar Arctic continent is thus supported by most competent geological authority, so is also our hypothesis that its disappearance was due to a submergence beneath the waters of the Arctic Ocean. On this point, what could be more explicit and satisfactory than the following from one of the greatest of the living geologists? We know very well that within a comparatively recent geological period, a wide stretch of Arctic land, of which Nova Zemlya and Spitsbergen formed a part, has been submerged. As to the natural conditions and forces which may be conceived as having brought about this continental catastrophe, geologists are not so well agreed. The French savant Alphonse Joseph Adamar has advanced a theory that this North Polar deluge was only one of an alternating series, which in age-long periods recurred first at the North and then at the South Pole. Flammarion, writing of it, says, "This theory depends on the fact that of unequal length of the seasons in the two hemispheres, our autumn and winter last 179 days. In the southern hemisphere, they last 186 days. This 7 days or 168 hours of difference increase each year the coldness of the pole. During 10,500 years, the ice accumulates at one pole and melts at the other, thereby displacing the Earth's center of gravity. Now the time will arrive when, after the maximum elevation of temperature on one side, catastrophe will happen, which will bring back the center of gravity to the center of the figure and cause an immense deluge. The deluge of the North Pole was 4,200 years ago. Therefore, the next will be 6,300. Hence, another recent theory teaches that the poles are periodically deluged, but simultaneously not in alternation. The alternative movement is that at the equator, the crust of the Earth at the equator is all the time rising or shrinking in a kind of Ennead rhythm. Whenever it sinks below the equilibrium figure due to its actual rate of rotation, lands emerge at the poles. Whenever it rises beyond the equilibrium figure, the polar lands sink and are submerged beneath the waters of the ocean. Professor Alexander Winchell thus expounds the view. It has been shown that one of the actions of the tides upon a planetary body tends to diminish its rate of rotation. Correspondingly, its equatorial protuberance will tend to diminish. In the case of a planet still retaining its liquid condition, the equatorial subsidence will keep nearly even pace with the retardation. To whatever extent viscosity exists, the subsidence will follow the retardation. There will exist an excess of protuberance beyond the equilibrium figure due to the actual rotation, and this will act as an additional retardative cause. In the case of an encrusted and somewhat rigid planet, the excess of ellipticity would attain its greatest value. It will continue to augment until this strain upon the mass should become sufficient to lower the excessive protuberance to the equilibrium figure. The recovery of this figure might take place convulsively. The equatorial regions would then subside and the polar would rise. In the case of an encrusted planet extensively covered, like the Earth, by a film of water, retarded rotation would be attended by a prompt subsidence of the equatorial waters and rise of the polar waters to about twice the same extent. In other words, the equatorial lands will emerge and the polar lands will become submerged. The amount of emergence will diminish with the increase of distance from the equator, and the amount of submergence will diminish with the increase of distance from the pole. In about the latitude of 30 degrees, the two tendencies will meet and neutralize each other. Under these conditions, an encrusted and ocean-covered planet, since it must be undergoing a process of rotary retardation, must possess the deepest oceans about the poles and the shallowest about the equator. The first emergences of land, accordingly, will take place within the equatorial zone, and the highest elevations and the greatest land areas will exist within that zone. the elevation of equatorial land masses will interpose new obstructions to the equatorial ocean current. This will divert it in new directions and thus modify all climates within reach of oceanic influences. Changes of currents will necessitate the migration of marine faunas, and changes of climate will modify the faunas and floras of the land. But the protrusion of the equatorial land mass could not increase indefinitely. The same central force will retain the ocean continually at the equilibrium figure, strains the solid mass in the same direction. The strain must at length become greater than the rigidity of the mass can withstand. The equatorial land protuberance will subside toward the level of the ocean. Some parts of the ocean's bottom must correspondingly rise. Naturally, the parts about the poles will rise most. Thus, some equatorial lands will become submerged, and some northern and southern areas may become newly emergent. But these vertical movements would not be arrested precisely at the point of recovery of the equilibrium figure, as suggested by Professor J.E. Todd, and less explicitly by Sir William Thomson. The movement will pass the equilibrium figure to an extent proportional to the circumambulation of the strain. The equatorial region will become too much depressed and the polar regions too much elevated. The effect of this will be to accelerate the rotation sufficiently to neutralize the ceaseless tidal retardation. The day will be shortened. The ocean will rise still higher along the shores of equatorial lands and subside along the shores of polar lands. An extension of polar lands would immediately modify the climates of the higher latitudes. They will become subject to greater extremes. A considerable elevation of polar lands will diminish the mean temperature, and the region of perpetual snow will be enlarged. These effects will visit the northern and southern hemispheres simultaneously. Such effects will follow from an excessive subsidence of equatorial lands, but the constant retardative action of the tides will cause the equatorial lands again to emerge and protrude beyond the limits of the equilibrium figure attained in the later age. Thus, the former condition would return and the former events will be repeated. In the nature of force and matter, these oscillations should be repeated many times. So Professor Todd suggests that the present terrestrial age is one of the equatorial land subsidence and of high latitude emergence. Immediately preceding the present, the Champlain epoch was one of the northern and probably of south polar subsidence, while further back in the glacial epoch, we have evidence of northern and perhaps also south latitude elevation. Leibniz, Dluck, and others have presented a still different view of the etiology of the deluge, according to which they are the result of a steady shrinkage of the earth and consequence of a circular cooling. According to this theory, after once a solid earth crust has been formed, the cooling nucleus within it withdrew the support on which the crust had rested, in proportion as it shrank away from beneath it, until, as often as the subterranean voids thus created became too great for the strength of the crust, this of necessity fell in with the force of incomputable tons, carrying the ruined surface to such a depth as to cause it immediately to be overflowed and submerged by the adjacent waters of the ocean. The geologic history of the earth is divided into its strongly marked periods by these successive collapsions of the rocky strata which constituted the primitive crust. Each succeeding cataclysm, says a recent advocate of the view, considered as a universal catastrophe, must leave the globe as a wreck, like the ruin of some immense cathedral whose dome and arches have fallen in. Cornice and frieze, pillar and entablature, broken and dislocated, lie at all angles of inclination and in the utmost confusion. So it is with the ancient rocks and more modern strata. Only to this mighty wreck have been added the outgushings of molten matter into fissures, creating dikes, and the unsparing movements of oceans, sweeping loose materials and perishing forms of all sorts from one place to another, partially covering up and disguising the desolation. Again, the same writer says, the present surface of the earth is comparatively recent. The last great cataclysm is, geologically speaking, not very ancient. Accumulating evidence compels us to believe that one of these destructive events has occurred since the human race was created. The facts I have presented plainly indicate that another is in the course of preparation. Each of these vast periodical voids between the nucleus and the crust is filled by a collapsing of the surface. Thus, if we assume that the globe was 100 or 300 miles greater in all its diameters when its crust became hard and was bathed with the earliest seas, and when marine plants and trilobites and mollusca began to appear, the lithological characteristics of the Paleozoic ages will be more acceptably deciphered. So, successively with the Carboniferous periods, whose vast areas have been folded up and overflowed, and whose fields for reproduction have been so numerous and extensive as to convince us that Arctic America, during those remote ages, presented tropical positions to the sun. Although starting with no such purpose, the author, in expounding this general Leibnizian theory of all deluges, incidentally explains the submersion of the primeval Arctic continent. In accordance with his theory, he asserts that the diameter of the Earth at the poles must have been at some more ancient epoch very much greater than now. It must have been more than 27 miles greater to permit such equatorial or tropical exposures to the sun as we know to be necessary for the production of those vegetable forms which abound in the cold measures of Arctic latitudes. If it was 50 or 100 miles greater during any portion of the Carboniferous age, it might have been 200 during the Tectonic period, and perhaps 300 or more when the life force began to fashion its primordial and rudimentary organisms upon its waiting surface. He furthermore distinctly asserts that Sir Isaac Newton's supposed demonstration that the oblateness of the Earth's figure is due to the centrifugal force generated by this rotation is an error unworthy of further consideration among geologists. The true explanation as regards it is stated as follows. The shorter axis of the globe, what at present our poles, are not the result of flattening by rotation, but by a sudden falling in of surface. Here, of course, is just that dawn sinking of wide polar regions in comparatively recent geologic time, demanded by the facts of Arctic geology. It must have been greater than any of those which have occurred in other portions of the globe, for it has permanently modified the originally and naturally spherical figure of the Earth. The author is compelled to believe that it, or one like it, occurred since the human race was created. Moreover, this belief is in no wise built upon the biblical record of the deluge, for he speaks almost bitterly of the retarding influence of Jewish legends upon the free expansion of the human intellect, and makes Moses one of the two men whose declarations and authority, more than the statements of all others, have retarded the advancement of general knowledge. Happily for Moses, the second in this portentous duumvirate is no worse a man than Sir Isaac Newton. It is by no means necessary to commit ourselves to any one of these theories of deluges, or to seek still other explanations of the recognized subsidence of the basin now occupied by the Arctic Ocean. Enough for the present that upon the authority of eminent physiographic geologists, we have shown 1. That the present distribution of land and water within the Arctic Circle is geologically speaking of very recent origin. 2. That the Paleozoic data of the highest explored latitudes demand for their explanation the hypothesis of an extensive circumpolar continent in Miocene time. 3. That lithological authorities affirm that such a continent existed. And 4. That physical geography has reached the conclusion that the known islands of the Arctic Ocean, such as Novaya Zemlya and the Spitsbergen, are simply mountaintops still remaining above the surface of the sea, which had come in and cover up the primeval continent to which they belong. 5. And finally, that the problem with the process by which this grand catastrophe was brought about is now sporadically engaging the thoughts of terrestrial physicists and geologists. And we're going to go ahead and stop it there on page 82 in regards to Paradise Found, the cradle of the human race at the North Pole. So as you can see, we have many various scientists who have done work in regards to prove from a scientific standpoint that it is not only possible, but it is admissible for us to accept that during the time which we can call that antediluvian period, that there was a subtropical continent that we potentially, us humans, come from. And during the Great Deluge, we end up spreading out to the four corners of the planet itself, but still keeping traces and elements of our past and who we are and where we come from with us within our mythos, which we now transition into our religious systems today, or belief systems that we call them. So with that being said, thank you, brothers and sisters, for having me tonight, for you stopping by, for listening to me as we build on to this topic of great discussion, because the origin of the human race is something that many of us have been interested in, and due to the fact that now we see that the planet is heating up, especially the North Pole, it would behoove us to take an interest of understanding and to investigate what's taking place up there now once again, especially now hearing the history of how the North Pole is actually known as the land of the sun because of how much light it gets, knowing that the land that we, or the planet that we currently on the surface itself is moderately new. This is not something that was during the ancient times. It's all new surface, which we pretty much can accept as we look about from the old buildings that we see from what we call the mud flood era. A lot of the stuff we know was here prior to, us being here today that we unfortunately forgot. And as we dive into these discussions and hopefully start having more roundtables to open up our minds, just like those schools of thought back then when they were actually coming together and more on the scientific platform, and to be able to have our peers to listen to our hypotheses and our views and opinions, so therefore we can draw a conclusion together that we all can accept and be happy with. So with that being said, brothers and sisters, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Please leave the comments below. Let me know that you're listening, you're paying attention. Hopefully for those of you who are just now hearing me now, if this information is something that you feel may interest someone else that you may know, don't forget to share it to them, because we'll love to have more people partake into this intellectual movement. And this intellectual movement, we know, can be traced going all the way back to our predecessors within the Kingdom of England, mainly King Edgar the Peaceful, underneath the big Benedictine intellectual movement. So we have to be those people once again, so therefore we can understand our present, and our present life will help shape and mold our future. Peace. I'm out.